Hello, and welcome back to Speak English Daily.
Hi, everyone. We are very happy to see you here today.
Have you ever met someone who sounded incredibly smart for the first 5 minutes, and then later you realized they were mostly just speaking confidently?
Oh, all the time, especially online. Some people speak with this calm certainty, and everybody suddenly treats them like philosophers.
Right? And then there are people who are genuinely intelligent, but when they explain something, it sounds messy and confusing.
That's because intelligence and communication are not the same thing.
I agree partly, but I also think most people underestimate how much communication shapes the way others judge intelligence.
I don't know, you can improve communication skills, sure, but some people naturally think more clearly. That usually shows in conversation.
Sometimes, but not always. I knew this guy in college who sounded brilliant in every group discussion. He used sophisticated words, paused dramatically before answering questions, and spoke like he was giving a TED Talk.
Let me guess, everybody admired him.
Completely. People thought he was the smartest student in class.
And he wasn't?
Honestly, not really. He was average academically, but he knew how to present ideas confidently.
See, that proves my point about human psychology more than communication itself. People are attracted to certainty.
No, clarity matters more than confidence.
I disagree. Confident people can sound convincing even when they're wrong.
For a short time, maybe. But if someone explains things clearly, people trust them more in the long run.
I'm not fully convinced. Think about job interviews. Two candidates give similar answers. One speaks smoothly and confidently. The other hesitates, searches for words, and sounds nervous. Most people immediately assume the confident person is smarter.
That's true, but confidence without substance eventually falls apart.
Eventually, but first impressions are powerful.
They are, and that's what fascinates me. Sometimes intelligence has less to do with raw knowledge and more to do with how ideas are delivered.
Which is kind of unfair when you think about it.
Completely unfair. Some brilliant people are terrible at explaining themselves.
I've met people like that. Engineers, programmers, researchers. They know so much, but when they speak, it feels like their thoughts are trapped in traffic.
That's such a good description.
They jump between ideas too fast. They skip context because their brain already understands the subject.
Meanwhile, somebody with average knowledge speaks slowly, uses simple language, gives relatable examples, and suddenly everybody thinks, wow, this person is really smart.
Sometimes people mistake confidence for intelligence.
No, clarity matters more than confidence.
But confidence creates the illusion of clarity.
Not always. I think people confuse sounding complicated with sounding intelligent, too.
That's another big one. Some people use difficult vocabulary almost like a performance.
And honestly, it can make them harder to understand.
Which strangely makes some listeners think this must be deep.
Yeah, because people often associate confusion with intelligence.
That's true. If somebody speaks simply, people sometimes assume the idea itself is simple.
Even though making complex ideas simple is actually difficult.
So maybe the real question is this. When we say someone sounds smart, are we talking about intelligence or communication skill?
I honestly think communication habits play a bigger role than people realize. Tiny habits change how intelligent somebody appears almost immediately.
Like what?
Speaking slower, for starters.
That one is powerful.
People who rush through sentences often sound nervous, even if they know what they're talking about. But when somebody slows down a little, their words feel more deliberate.
There's also this strange psychological effect where slower speech makes people seem more thoughtful.
Yes, unless they're speaking painfully slow.
True, then it sounds like their brain is buffering.
Exactly. But a calm pace gives ideas room to breathe. I noticed this during presentations in university. The students who spoke too fast usually sounded less confident, even when their information was good.
And the quieter students often sounded more intelligent because they chose their words carefully.
Which brings us to another habit, pausing before answering.
Some people use silence strategically.
I think most people are just terrified of silence.
That's because silence creates pressure in conversations.
It does, but smart communicators don't panic during that pressure. They pause, think, and then respond clearly.
Meanwhile, nervous people start rambling.
Most people talk too much because they're nervous.
I agree with that, especially in job interviews. Candidates think they need to fill every second with words.
And they end up burying their own point.
I interviewed someone once who gave a 2-minute answer to a simple question.
What was the question?
What's one strength you bring to a team?
Oh, no.
He started talking about childhood experiences, school competitions, leadership philosophy. I forgot the original question halfway through.
That happens all the time. People think longer answers sound smarter.
But concise answers usually sound more confident.
And more articulate.
That word matters. Articulate people are not necessarily more intelligent. They're just better at organizing thoughts into understandable language.
That's why simple wording is underrated.
A lot of people think complex vocabulary equals intelligence.
But if you can explain something simply, it usually means you understand it deeply.
I had a professor who could explain advanced economics using coffee shops and pizza restaurants.
Those are the best teachers.
Everybody loved his classes because he made difficult ideas feel approachable.
Compare that to people who use giant words every 10 seconds.
Sometimes that feels more like performance than communication.
And honestly, simple language sounds more persuasive because people actually understand it.
Persuasive is a good word here. Intelligent-sounding people often make listeners feel comfortable following their ideas.
Yes, because clarity reduces mental effort.
That's a very analytical way to put it.
Thank you.
You sounded smart for a second there.
See? Timing and delivery.
But there's another habit nobody talks about enough: asking good questions.
Oh, that's huge.
People think intelligent conversations are about giving impressive answers, but thoughtful questions often leave a stronger impression.
I've noticed that in group conversations. The smartest person in the room is sometimes the one speaking the least, but asking the best questions.
Because good questions reveal curiosity and awareness.
Also, listening skills.
That too. Intelligent communicators don't interrupt constantly.
Which is becoming rare now.
Social media probably made this worse. Everybody wants to react instantly.
Podcasts, too, sometimes. You can tell when hosts are waiting to speak instead of actually listening.
And audiences notice that subconsciously.
Definitely. Somebody who listens carefully sounds calmer, more thoughtful, and more emotionally intelligent, while interrupters often sound insecure or desperate to prove themselves. That desperation changes everything. The conversation starts feeling competitive instead of natural. And people can feel that energy immediately. There's also a difference between sounding knowledgeable and sounding present. Explain that. Some people memorize impressive information, but they don't adapt to the conversation. Truly intelligent communicators respond naturally to what's happening in real time. That's such an important distinction. It's why some podcast clips go viral. The speaker sounds authentic, calm, concise, and emotionally aware at the same time. By the way, I'm curious about something. Have you ever met someone who sounded incredibly smart during a conversation, and what made them stand out to you? Our listeners can tell us in the comments section. I bet a lot of people will mention calm speakers rather than loud ones. Calm speakers really do have an advantage, though. The moment somebody speaks with a steady tone, people start assuming they know what they're talking about. Tone of voice changes everything. Completely. You can say the same sentence in 2 different ways and sound either intelligent or completely lost. Hesitation is a big factor, too. Yeah, the second somebody starts saying, maybe, or I don't know too often, people unconsciously trust them less. Which is interesting because uncertainty is actually normal and healthy sometimes. But socially, certainty is rewarded more than accuracy. That's dangerous, honestly. Maybe, but it makes sense psychologically. Human beings are constantly searching for signals of competence. People trust certainty too easily because confidence signals competence, or at least the appearance of competence. Same thing in daily conversations sometimes. Not really. Somebody can sound confident and still be completely wrong. Of course, but confidence reduces doubt in the listener's mind. That's powerful socially. I noticed this during school debates. There were students who spoke with such certainty that even weak arguments sounded convincing. Meanwhile, students with stronger ideas sometimes sounded unsure and lost the room. Which is frustrating because hesitation doesn't automatically mean lack of intelligence. Sometimes intelligent people hesitate because they're considering multiple possibilities. Yes, they're thinking carefully, while overconfident people often simplify everything into absolute statements. And audiences love absolute statements, especially online. Social media made this so much worse. Definitely. Platforms reward people who sound certain, fast, and emotionally intense. Nobody goes viral saying, well, the issue is actually a little complicated. Imagine a motivational speaker starting a video with, there are several perspectives worth considering. The audience would leave in 5 seconds. But if somebody points at the camera and says, this is the truth nobody wants to hear, suddenly millions of views. Even if the advice is questionable, confidence creates momentum, and confidence has physical signals too. Body language matters a lot. Eye contact, posture, facial expressions. Even the way somebody enters a room affects perception. There's this strange thing where calm movement looks intelligent. That's true. Fast, nervous movements can make people appear uncertain. I had a teacher once who barely raised his voice. He spoke slowly, maintained eye contact, and paused comfortably after important points. Let me guess, everybody respected him. Completely. The room became silent whenever he started talking. That kind of presence is rare. And what's interesting is that he never tried to sound impressive. He just sounded grounded, which ironically made him more persuasive. Compare that to people who overperform confidence. The fake alpha energy people? Yes, the ones who speak like every sentence is a movie trailer. That style works temporarily, though. Maybe online. Social media clips reward certainty, confidence, and emotional punchlines. Nuance usually loses. That's why some creators sound intelligent in 30-second clips, but confusing in long conversations. Because long conversations expose depth, or lack of depth. There's also another thing happening. People often confuse emotional control with intelligence. Explain that. Someone who stays calm under pressure automatically appears more capable, even during disagreements. That's so true. The calmer person usually looks smarter in arguments, even before the discussion is finished. Because emotional stability feels authoritative, which means perception is doing a lot of work here, more than people realize. You know what's wild? Some people sound intelligent simply because they never sound unsure. That line is painfully accurate. But honestly, I don't think sounding certain should matter more than being thoughtful. Ideally, it shouldn't, but socially, humans react to delivery first and accuracy second, which creates a weird problem for intelligent people who are naturally cautious thinkers. Yeah, careful thinkers often sound less confident because they see complexity, and complexity doesn't always sound powerful in conversation, especially in a world addicted to simple answers. You know, this is where things become really unfair for genuinely intelligent people, because some of them sound confusing even when they know a lot.
More than some, I think it happens constantly. There are brilliant people who completely lose others during conversations. I'm going to defend them a little here. I expected that. Because deep thinkers often operate on multiple layers mentally, what sounds confusing to listeners may actually be compressed thinking. That's true to a point, but communication still matters. Of course it matters. I just think people underestimate how difficult it is to translate complex ideas into simple language. Fair, but some people don't even try to simplify. That's also true.
They speak like they're writing a research paper nobody asked for.
I had a professor like that in university. Every answer sounded like he swallowed an encyclopedia.
Those professors are legendary.
Somebody would ask a basic question, and suddenly we were traveling through philosophy, economics, ancient history, and quantum mechanics.
Meanwhile, the students are sitting there wondering what just happened.
Completely lost.
And sometimes the issue is emotional awareness. Intelligent people can become so focused on information that they forget there are actual humans listening.
That's a really important point.
They talk at people instead of with people.
Meaning they prioritize accuracy over connection.
Yes. Communication is not just transferring information, it's making another person feel included in the idea.
That's difficult for highly analytical people sometimes.
Especially if they spend most of their time in technical environments. Engineers, researchers, scientists.
Even certain YouTubers.
Oh, definitely. Some educational creators make simple topics sound painfully complicated.
And weirdly, their audiences sometimes admire them more because of that.
Because difficulty creates the illusion of depth.
Which is such a trap.
There's also vocabulary obsession.
Yes, some people think using enormous words automatically makes them sound intelligent.
Sometimes it just sounds exhausting.
I watched an interview recently where a guy used 5 complicated words when one normal word would have worked perfectly.
I know the type. Instead of saying helpful, they say something like instrumentally advantageous.
Stop.
Instead of confusing, they say cognitively disorienting.
You sound like a malfunctioning robot professor.
Thank you. I practiced for this moment.
That style creates distance, though. It makes conversations feel cold.
Unless the audience already belongs to that technical world.
True. Context matters.
Because specialists often communicate differently with each other. A medical researcher talking to another medical researcher doesn't need to simplify every term.
That's fair, but when you're speaking to general audiences, clarity becomes your responsibility.
I agree with that.
If nobody understands you, communication failed.
Strong statement.
But true.
I partly disagree.
Of course you do.
Because listeners also have responsibility. Sometimes ideas are genuinely difficult and require effort.
Sure, but great communicators guide people through difficult ideas gradually.
That's why the best teachers are unforgettable. They know how to build understanding step by step.
Instead of drowning people immediately.
I think insecurity also plays a role sometimes.
In what way?
Some people intentionally overcomplicate their language because they want to sound intellectual.
Ah, intellectual theater.
Yes, they think simple communication sounds less impressive.
Ironically, the smartest people I've met usually explain things very simply.
Same.
They don't need to prove intelligence every 30 seconds.
That's confidence again.
Real confidence this time, not performance confidence.
Exactly. They're comfortable sounding normal.
While insecure people often decorate every sentence.
That's such a perfect description.
You can almost hear the mental struggle. How can I make this sound more sophisticated?
Meanwhile, the listener is fighting for survival.
Honestly, some conversations feel like verbal escape rooms.
Especially with people who never adapt to the audience.
That's a huge communication mistake.
Emotional intelligence matters here too. Good communicators notice confusion on people's faces.
Bad communicators keep going anyway.
Faster and faster sometimes.
until the conversation becomes a hostage situation.
And then everybody nods politely while understanding absolutely nothing.
Which raises another uncomfortable question. Are some people admired for intelligence when people are actually just afraid to admit they're confused?
Honestly, I think this is the part people care about most. Not just why certain people sound smart, but how normal people can improve the way they communicate.
Which is good news because most of these skills are learnable.
Completely learnable.
Though probably not overnight.
No, but small changes create noticeable results surprisingly fast.
So where would you start?
Organizing thoughts before speaking.
That alone changes everything.
People often start talking before they know what they actually want to say. Then the sentence becomes this chaotic adventure with no direction.
That's where filler words explode.
Exactly. Like, basically, the brain is buying time.
I still use filler words sometimes.
Everybody does occasionally. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is reducing unnecessary noise.
One trick that helped me was getting comfortable with short pauses instead of filling silence instantly.
That's huge. A 2-second pause sounds far more confident than 10 filler words.
Also, pauses make listeners pay attention.
Because they create structure, conversations become easier to follow.
Another underrated skill is learning how to build a point clearly.
Yes, start simple, then expand. Some people start in the middle of their thought process, and everybody else gets lost immediately.
It's like opening a movie halfway through.
Exactly. Great communicators create mental maps for listeners.
That's why examples and stories matter so much.
Stories make ideas memorable. Facts alone usually disappear quickly.
I remember a manager I worked with years ago. He explained business problems through everyday situations.
Those people are brilliant communicators.
One time he compared poor teamwork to people trying to cook in the same kitchen without speaking to each other.
That's such a visual example.
And everybody understood instantly.
Because the brain loves relatable images.
Which is funny because many people trying to sound intelligent avoid simple examples.
They think simplicity weakens credibility.
When actually it strengthens understanding.
Another thing people underestimate is listening.
Good listeners almost always sound smarter.
Because they respond to the actual conversation instead of waiting to perform their next speech.
That's where follow-up questions become important.
Yes, intelligent conversations feel alive because people explore ideas together.
Not compete for attention.
Exactly. Asking thoughtful follow-up questions signals curiosity, confidence, and emotional awareness.
Plus, it makes the other person feel respected.
Which improves the quality of the conversation naturally.
There's also energy control.
Calm energy is powerful.
People associate emotional steadiness with competence.
Especially during disagreements, someone who stays composed automatically sounds more persuasive.
While frantic energy creates doubt.
Even if the actual point is good.
I think tone matters more than people realize.
Tone can completely change how intelligence is perceived.
You can hear it in podcasts. Some hosts sound grounded and thoughtful, even when discussing simple topics.
Because they don't sound desperate to impress anybody.
That desperation is the real problem.
Honestly, yes.
Trying too hard to sound smart has the opposite effect.
I agree with that completely.
Wow, that was immediate.
Because it's true. The moment people force intelligence, conversations become unnatural.
You can hear the performance.
It creates tension. Every sentence starts sounding calculated.
And ironically, relaxed communicators often sound more intelligent because they're focused on connection rather than image.
That's such an important point.
I think many people approach conversations like exams.
Instead of exchanges.
Yes, they're constantly trying to prove worth.
Which usually makes them less present.
The smartest sounding people I know are often the least obsessed with appearing smart.
Same. They ask questions comfortably. They admit when they don't know something. They explain ideas naturally.
There's confidence in simplicity.
Real confidence.
Vocabulary matters too. but people approach it the wrong way.
Completely wrong.
Memorizing giant words randomly is not the answer.
Natural vocabulary growth is much more effective.
Reading helps.
Listening helps too. Podcasts, interviews, conversations.
Over time, you absorb phrasing naturally instead of forcing it,
And that sounds more authentic.
which matters because authenticity is persuasive.
Also, people should stop thinking intelligent communication means speaking nonstop.
That's a massive misconception.
Some of the smartest conversationalists know when to stop talking.
Concise people usually sound more confident because they trust their point without over-explaining it.
While insecure communicators often keep adding words, hoping something sounds impressive.
Which usually weakens the original point.
Honestly, one of the best communication habits is simply respecting the listener's attention.
That's a great way to put it.
Clear structure, calm delivery, good listening, simple wording, relevant examples.
And less ego.
Much less ego.
Because once the conversation becomes a performance, intelligence starts sounding artificial.
You know what question keeps sitting in my mind after this whole conversation?
What's that?
Is sounding smart more important than actually being smart?
Socially, sometimes yes.
That answer is depressing.
I didn't say I liked it, I'm just being honest. Perception shapes opportunity more than people want to admit.
Job interviews, leadership positions, networking.
Even friendships sometimes. The way people communicate affects how others value their ideas.
Which means somebody with average knowledge but strong communication can outperform somebody with deeper knowledge but weak communication.
That happens constantly.
But I still think reality catches up eventually.
Depends on the environment.
Explain.
In fast-moving environments, first impressions matter a lot. Confidence, clarity, presence, these things create momentum quickly.
But long term?
Long-term, substance matters more.
That's reassuring.
Though ideally, you want both. Knowledge and communication together are incredibly powerful.
That combination is rare, though.
Because many people focus on one side only.
Either they collect information endlessly but never learn how to express it,
Or they master presentation without developing real depth.
and honestly, the second type is becoming more common online.
Because modern platforms reward performance.
Short clips, strong opinions, fast certainty,
Attention has become competitive.
which creates pressure to sound impressive immediately. But intelligent communication in real life usually looks quieter than people expect.
That's true.
It's often calm, curious, flexible.
Flexible is such an underrated trait.
Intelligent people change their minds when new information appears.
While insecure people defend bad opinions forever because they think admitting uncertainty makes them look weak.
Emotional intelligence plays a huge role there.
Probably more than IQ in daily conversations, honestly.
I agree with that more than I expected to. Emotional awareness changes communication completely.
Because conversations are emotional experiences, not just information exchanges.
Somebody can be technically brilliant and still make people feel ignored, confused, or uncomfortable.
While somebody with less expertise can create understanding, trust, and connection.
And people remember how conversations feel,
More than the actual word sometimes.
which is why listening matters so much,
And humility.
especially humility.
Confident ignorance is dangerous.
Very dangerous.
But quiet intelligence can also become invisible if people never learn to express themselves clearly.
So maybe communication is not fake intelligence. Maybe it's part of intelligence itself.
That's interesting.
Think about it. What's the value of knowledge if nobody understands what you mean?
Fair point.
Communication turns private understanding into shared understanding.
Which is probably why great teachers, speakers, and storytellers have so much influence.
They make people feel capable of understanding difficult things.
And that's powerful.
I also think intelligent people tend to become more comfortable saying, "I don't know,"
Because they understand how complex reality is.
while people pretending to know everything usually reveal insecurity eventually.
The older I get, the more suspicious I become of people who sound certain about absolutely everything.
Same.
Smarter intelligence often sounds more curious than arrogant.
That's such a good sentence.
Thank you. I prepared it dramatically in my head before saying it.
I could tell.
So, where do we land after all this?
I think sounding smart opens doors, but being genuinely thoughtful keeps those doors open.
That's probably true.
And maybe the goal shouldn't be sounding intelligent anyway.
Then what should the goal be?
Understanding people better, expressing ideas clearly, staying curious, communicating honestly.
That sounds less glamorous than pretending to be a genius online.
But probably more useful in real life.
Fair enough.
Maybe real intelligence is making complicated things feel simple.
And maybe wisdom is knowing when to stay quiet.